Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sequoia Fund Live. I am Russ Siegel, the Executive Director of Sequoia Fund. I'll be your host for the next little while. And you see my head here, but you may see my head explode because this is such a big topic that we're talking about tonight. You could almost say it's epic. Tonight, our guest is Dr. Per Cap himself, Shawn Spruce, and we're going to be talking about the Epic Games versus Apple lawsuit. Shawn, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Russ. And you're right. This is epic. It's just the implications of this whole issue with regards to digital commerce are huge and impacts pretty much everybody. If you've got a phone, if you carry a smartphone, this impacts you, whether or not you play video games, whether or not you purchase apps, just carrying that phone around, downloading free apps, it impacts you tremendously.
So I was talking about this at dinner with my wife last night, and I just mentioned the topic, and she said, "Who's going to care? Why is this a topic for Sequoia Fund Live?" And I said, "Well, you have a mobile phone, you use apps, and I think, and we'll get into this, but I think Epic may have a good argument. I'm not sure if they had a good case." And I think maybe those two are separate things. A lot of people think the argument is the case, but I'm not sure that is. I'm no legal scholar, but just looking at it from all the different angles, and of course I know in a court case they're looking at it from a very narrow viewpoint. But from a consumer standpoint, I don't want to overpay for apps, but I also want to make sure that the apps I use work, that they're well maintained and updated and things like that. So I kind of get it. I also know that in rural areas, we had this experience last year with one of our programs that we rolled out nationwide called Camp Girl Boss. We had people even in urban areas who had terrible internet service, but they did everything on their mobile device. And so we had people in very, very rural areas, people in downtown Philadelphia, who were relying on apps to get the work done, to actually take this course. Just because you think a big city would have great internet, and it doesn't always. So this is a very multi-layered cake, I guess we could say. So start us off and tell us, whenever you're ready to go into the slides, I'll pop those up and you just tell me, I'll drive and you tell me where we're going and take us through this whole case, because it sounds like it's really heady, and it is, but it's very fascinating.
Okay. So yeah, and you're right. It all comes down to these mobile apps. And this is an industry that I think a lot of us realize has just completely exploded over the last 10 years or so. And, it really kind of kicked off when Apple introduced its App Store back in 2008. At that time, I believe there were only about 500 mobile apps in the world.
Really?
And then just within a few years,
Wow.
there were millions of apps, right? So there's just so many apps out there. It's a huge industry. Globally, last year, mobile app revenue was well over $500 billion collectively. I mean, it's just enormous. And yeah, it's cool because a lot of these apps are able to tap into the hardware of iPhones, and their systems work better in that app format than they do as an actual website. So it's great technology. It's completely revolutionized the way we live, the way we buy things, the way we do things. It's created huge industries and huge businesses that benefit from, look at Uber, and some of these other companies that have just totally exist because of the development of the whole app economy and everything it
Uber's
represents.
One of the largest transportation companies in the world, owns no cars. One of the biggest hospitality companies, Airbnb, owns no hotels. They own no property.
Yeah. And we're going to see how that all plays out, because I sometimes just shake my head at that. Like, really? They've got bigger market cap than Ford Motor Company, and yet they it's all here. It's all on the phone.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at that first slide, because again, we just wrapped up earlier this week on Monday, a 3-week bench trial in California in which Epic Games, which is a pretty high profile video game company and software development company. Interestingly enough, they're based in North Carolina, right here in our home state here. And they sued Apple. And it goes back to August. They've been upset with Apple for a number of years now. Epic Games produces a number of pretty high profile video games. Their most famous video game is one called Fortnite, and I'll talk about that one here shortly. But essentially, they just got really frustrated with Apple because, as anybody who owns an iPhone knows, and a lot of people do own iPhones, right? There's over 1 billion iPhones in the world. But if you have an iPhone and you want to download an app, you have to go through their app store, right? They have their own proprietary platform for downloading and purchasing apps. Now, that's different from Android, where you can purchase apps through the Google Play Store, but you also have other options. It is possible to do that. Apple, nope. There's no way around that. Right. If you're going to buy any kind of app or download an app on your iPhone, you've got to go through the Apple Store. Well, Epic Games doesn't think that's fair. Apple thinks it is fair. So it's up for a court now to decide. So what Epic Games contended was that it's not fair that people have to use the App Store to purchase our games. They should also have other app stores, third-party app stores from which people can purchase apps, Epic game apps and other apps as well on an iPhone. Okay, that's the first basis of contention. And then the second is allow app developers to use their own in-app payment system. So, back when apps first got started, most of the apps were, you have to buy them, right? You have to purchase them. And now we have a lot of apps that are available for free. And you either have a subscription that goes with that, or there's some kind of in-app purchases from which app developers can make money. So, for instance, Fortnite, this video game, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but that's a free game. And if you've never heard of Fortnite, that's okay, because I'm sure your kids have, because it's absolutely huge with the youth.
It just means that you've been vacationing on Mars, right?
It's nothing short of a cultural phenomenon. We think of us older folks and, the way we talked on phones or the way we used to use like instant messaging. Fortnite is the way that a lot of young people, especially boys, communicate. It's their form of social media, and it's all wrapped up into this really cool video game. It's a kind of a battle royale, survival of the think Hunger Games meets the video game world, and that you're in this virtual world with a team of other players, and you got to fight it out till the bitter end. And you fight zombies and other players, and everybody's got their own avatar, and there's different kinds of weapons, and there's all kinds of cool little scenarios that you come across. It's enormously huge. And even though Epic Games provides this game for free, the way they make money off it is that people want to make in-game purchases in the app. Like, you can buy armor and various items for your avatar's outfit. You can purchase weapons and supplies. And it seems kind of crazy, really, people are actually going to buy little colorful shirts for their avatars. So this is a video game. This isn't real. These aren't real products. You can't do anything. This is not a real weapon. It's not a real vest. It's not a real pair of boots. But when you get into these video games, you literally get transported into this virtual world, and it's just really intense. And since Fortnite was launched, Epic Games has made billions of dollars through these in-app purchases. So the way it works, though, is that for people to make these in-app purchases on the iPhone, if they're playing Fortnite through the iPhone, they have to use the iPhone's in-app payment system. And again, that's a proprietary platform. So they've got to go through there. So Apple gets a cut off this, right? They get a cut off anytime somebody downloads an app and they have to pay for it. And they also get a cut for these in-game purchases. And the cut is as high as 30%.
Ooh.
And Epic Games just said, that's nuts. That's just way too high. We're not going to pay that. That's not fair. Apple says it is fair. They say, look, this is, we created this system. It's a safe system. It's like you said, when you download apps, you want to make sure that they work right. You want to make sure that they're secure, that they're safe to download. And Apple says that's why they charge as much as they do. And they invested in the technology. They created this huge market for these apps. And if you want to play on their platform, then you got to pay. You got to pay to play, essentially. So the CEO of Epic Games got so frustrated last summer, unbeknownst to Apple, the company went ahead and created in an update. It was just a routine, periodic update to Fortnite. But what they did is they actually created their own proprietary in-game payment system independently of Apple. Now that totally violates Apple's App Store rules. Apple just completely screamed bloody murder. They instantly kicked Fortnite off the App Store. Actually, incidentally, Google Play did as well. So that, because of the same thing. And Google was really frustrated. You don't hear about that as much, but actually, Epic is in process of suing Google too, or their parent company Alphabet.
They don't go for small targets, do they?
No. I mean, they're going big time. So yeah, we did this huge, lawsuit that started earlier this month. And it was 3 weeks of testimony and just a lot of back and forth. And it really kind of all comes down to this critical issue of what is a digital market? What is a digital market? I'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide here.
Sure. Before we get to that slide, a couple of things come to mind, because I know a lot of people are not tech savvy. I wouldn't consider myself tech savvy. I mean, the platform we're using here to do this live stream is really simplified because it was built for people like me. But I'm seeing something here. I'm seeing some parallels to like mom and pop business, Main Street type concepts that, if you have a city and part of the city is, maybe it's not run down, but it's not policed well, it's not well kept, and maybe it's not safe, and you've got this really nice shopping center and the rent is a little bit higher in that shopping center, but it's well kept, it has a good security presence, the parking lot is always kept clean, it's well maintained, and then there's a lot of traffic because it's right on a busy highway. A lot of times, and people don't really know this, but when you rent commercial space, a lot of commercial leases have a variable clause in there, a variable lease clause that says, if your revenue goes above this certain level, we get a cut of that because of where you are. You can bet that part of your success is due to your location, to the way we keep up the building, to your visibility, and so forth. And I kind of see that in the, Apple has this really easy to use app store, very easy to find what you're looking for. And you know that they vetted all the apps in there. They put them through their paces. They've tested them. They make sure they work. They're not just sending out poorly made junk that, if you go into a restaurant and the salsa is bad, it doesn't matter that they bought that salsa from somebody. You're going to blame the restaurant. So if something goes wrong with one of those apps, you're probably not going to be so upset with the app creator as you are Apple, because you're holding that iPhone in your hand. And so as I was watching all this unfold, I'm thinking, this is just a high-tech version of stuff that's been going on in the real world forever. But here we go. Next slide here.
So this is the App Store. It's a huge money maker. And it's interesting because, Apple is the world's largest company in the world based on its market cap, the number of shares of stock it has based on their share price. It's worth now over $2 trillion. Last year, the company generated just under $300 billion in revenue. And, the lion's share of that comes from the iPhone. In fact, Apple, they break their business down into 5 main categories, and the iPhone is one of those. And then services are another one. And the bulk of it comes from that iPhone. Like I said, there's over 1 billion iPhones out there. I think last year they sold almost 200 million iPhones. And it's just enormously profitable. And yeah, it is like, think of it like a big shopping mall. You know, this app store. You go in there and you have all these different options. And yeah, you know, if you have a store in a shopping mall, you have to pay a fee to have that store in there. And you know, you have to play by the rules of whoever owns that shopping mall. So it is, and essentially this is a digital marketplace. And that's where it's confusing, is because just people are having, there's just a difficult time, I think, for a lot of us. Technology is changing so quickly and it's evolving so quickly. And I think some of these issues are just coming on so quickly. It's just, as people, as a society, we're kind of having a hard time wrapping our hands around how all these technologies work and what the pros and cons are. It's interesting, definitely interesting. So yeah, Apple is, you know, it's a huge company. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide here. And this is Epic Games. Okay. And like I said earlier, they're based in North Carolina. This company is about 30 years old. And these are some of their top brands. Yeah. Fortnite is their biggest game. Most of them are these kind of shoot 'em up fantasy type games. Their revenue last year was just under $30 billion. So, you know, they're a fraction of the size of Apple, but they're still a pretty good sized company. You know, they've had over collectively, the company itself, I'm sorry, is worth about just under $30 billion. Its market cap is it's a privately held company, but it's worth about just under 30 billion. And I think last year it made just under $4 billion in revenue. I'm sorry. So it's not,
that's still healthy. That's
still a healthy company. Still a healthy company. It really is. And, you know, they're kind of trying to, I think, you know, the CEO of Epic, and I'll talk more about him shortly here, but he's kind of trying to paint this whole kind of David and Goliath image, you know, of like, you're this noble little company fighting the big behemoth bad guy Apple. And it's really not like that. You know, it's not, I mean, rather than David and Goliath, I would probably use the analogy more of like Vin Diesel versus The Rock, right? You get these two really buffed guys who have some bad blood between them, a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of a competition going on. They're both huge stars, but come on, let's face it. The big bald-headed guy from Hawaii, he's the alpha movie star there, right?
Well, he's also a trained wrestler.
He's a trained wrestler. And he played Division I college football.
Right.
And I think he does better with the chicks. I mean, he's the guy, right?
But, you know, Vin Diesel does not need to ride The Rock's back to the grocery store.
That's right.
But Epic definitely has to ride Apple's back if they want to go anywhere.
They do, except they do have other options, right? They've got their games available on Google Play, on Android devices. You can play them on PlayStation and Xbox. A lot of people play on PCs. And at the heart of this whole thing is this issue of, does Apple have a monopoly? Do they control all these apps? Are they controlling Epic's business? And Epic says they are, and Apple responded, hey, look, you know, you don't have to just use our app store. You can go to Google. People can play your game on PCs. In fact, this in-game currency that players purchase, you can pretty much shift seamlessly between platforms. Like, I could be playing on an iPhone and I could purchase in-game currency. They call them V-Bucks in Fortnite. I could buy V-Bucks in Fortnite on my iPhone, and I could transition to a PC and I could still use those V-Bucks that I bought on my iPhone on my PC. So Apple's like, look, there's other games in town. But at the same time, I mean, Apple is the main dog here. Like, if you want to be anybody, you got to pretty much go through the App Store. You got to deal with the iPhone. So, you know, so you can see both sides of this, and there always are two sides to everything, you know.
It's what makes a good lawsuit.
Yeah, for sure. So let's look at another slide here. Okay, these are our key players. So this guy here in the middle, this is Tim Sweeney, and he is the CEO and founder of Epic Games. And he's just the classic kind of keyboard to riches tech success story. He started out at the age of 21 or 20 years old, I believe, in his parents' basement, creating games and coding and things like that. And, you know, through that time, Epic has just grown enormously. About 20 years ago, they originally started in Maryland. 20 years ago, they moved to North Carolina. They're based in Cary, just outside of Raleigh. And, he's a billionaire. according to Forbes, I think his net worth is over $7 billion now. And Fortnite is the big game. And, he's lawyered up. He's going after Apple in the United States. He's also going after Apple in the UK and Australia, and he's going after Google. And, he's got this whole movement. He's trying to encourage other app developers and other tech people to rally in this whole battle, this fight against Apple. He calls it Project Liberty. So we'll see where Project Liberty goes. Next, we have Tim Cook. Tim Cook is the CEO of Apple. He's been in that position since 2011 when Steve Jobs stepped down. And he's been a firm, staunch advocate for the fairness, what he says is the fairness of Apple's App Store policies. He's testified before Congress. He testified last week for 4 hours, arguing that, the App Store is fair. People have other options. This is not the only game in town. We have a right to charge a percentage of, what this in-game currency costs. That's our right to do so. Tim Sweeney says they charge too much. Tim Cook says they don't. It's estimated that Apple makes about, I think in the court, let me check my notes here. I think in court they argued that Apple charged, in court, Epic Games argued that Apple charged, what was it? Let's see. They charged, I think they predicted, in court, Epic's attorneys threw out the number that Apple makes about an 80% profit off the App Store, which translates into quite a few billions of dollars. And Apple disputed that. They disputed that, but they wouldn't share what their profit is or how much they're actually making off it. And they said they can't break those numbers down. It's like I said earlier, Apple has 5 core businesses, and it's just kind of embedded in that. And I don't know, for a company as sophisticated and innovative as Apple is, I can't believe they don't know how much they're making off that App Store.
Sounds fishy.
Yeah. But anyway, Tim Cook, he's a cool customer. He's no stranger to the courtroom. Apple's been down this road before. They've had, there's a case in Europe with regard to Spotify, the music platform, and how Apple manages, controls those music downloads. And so this is not his first rodeo. And he's 60 years old. And I think he's like the world's oldest hipster too. He's just like totally got it going on with that whole.
Isn't he from Alabama?
He is. Yeah. Yep. He's from Alabama. I think his dad was kind of a blue collar guy. I think his mom worked in a pharmacy. He does not have, he was not born with a silver or golden spoon in his mouth by any means. Yeah. Next we have the U.S. District Judge for the Northern California District, which is where this bench trial took place. It was in Oakland, California. Her name's Yvonne Gonzalez Rogers. And she's actually presided over previous lawsuits with Apple. So she's pretty familiar with Apple and a lot of these issues and antitrust, this whole idea of whether or not a company has an unfair competitive advantage. And we have antitrust laws, which are designed to promote competition and prevent a single company from just completely monopolizing an industry. So she's got her hands full. The case wrapped up on Monday, but it's going to be months before we get a decision on this. She's got a lot of homework to do. And realistically, whoever wins, there's going to be appeals. It'll probably be locked up in appeals for years. So essentially what's at stake is, Tim Sweeney is not asking for monetary damages. Epic Games is not asking for monetary damages. What they're asking for is that Apple opens up their iPhones and allows third-party app stores to operate on its platform, and also that it allows developers and other app companies to operate their own payment systems inside iPhone devices. So that's what they're asking for. If Epic wins, it's going to be huge because, what we pay for apps and how we access our apps, especially for iPhone users, is going to be dramatically impacted. And if Apple wins, it's going to be a warning, a shot across the bow there to any other app developers like, hey, stay in your lane. This is the way it works, and this is the way it's going to continue to work.
Yeah.
Okay. So our other key players are consumers, like I just mentioned. It's you, me, and everybody else. And it's not just iPhone. Ultimately, this impacts more than just iPhone users. Anybody with a smartphone. How we access our apps, how much we pay for them. If we're, video game apps are hands down the most popular apps. I mean, just hands down. Last year there were twice as many video game app downloads as the next largest or broadest app category, which is business apps. So, these phones, they're great for all kinds of things, but the vast, games are what really drive the whole app economy.
I would bet, and I would bet everything I've got in the bank right now that my wife is sitting in here watching television and playing a game on her phone. If I'm lying, I'm dying.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned her and game players, because that's our next key player here is Mr. Tim Sweeney. And if you don't see his name in the Wall Street Journal every day or see him in CNBC or interviews, that's because Tim Sweeney is he's not a tech guru. He doesn't run a Fortune 500 company. Tim Sweeney is a proud member of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. He's a good friend of mine, and I just can't get over the names there, Tim Sweeney and Tim Sweeney.
I noticed how you put those two together.
They both wear hoodies. They both love to play video games. They're both in North Carolina. And yeah, Tim Sweeney, he's a good friend of mine, lives in Cherokee, born and raised, plays a lot of video games. His kids love to play video games. And the players are a big part of this. They're driving this whole industry, and how they access games, how they play games. It's going to be greatly impacted by how this whole court case goes.
Yeah.
Let's look at another slide here. Okay, so just to kind of help put things in perspective in terms of just how big Apple is. So if you look at just this first quarter of 2021, this was January through the end of March, quarter one, we call that. Apple has over 55% of the market share for the smartphone. So that iPhone is the main smartphone in the United States. Samsung comes in second at just under 30%. And then you've got these other players, LG, Lenovo, and everybody else is just kind of fighting for the scraps. But Apple and Samsung, they're the big dogs. So you can see how this case with regard to the App Store and in-game purchases, you can see how it impacts so many people and how much money is involved because of simply how huge the iPhone is in the United States and globally as well.
It's a significant lead. Wow.
Yeah. Let's look at another slide here. So the two main operating systems, of course, are Apple's iOS system, which is over 50% of smartphones run off that system. That's all the iPhones out there. And then Google's Android operating system represents 47%. So, any of these companies that run Android phones, they're about half and half with regard to operating systems. And that's, a lot of companies, not just, Samsung is not the only company that runs Androids. And then you've got these lesser known operating systems. Microsoft actually has an operating system for a smartphone. It has a less than 0.5% market share. And good old BlackBerry, they're still around.
I miss my BlackBerry. Oh, I miss it.
Well, what's so crazy is I still run with a BlackBerry, man. I think I'm the only person left that still has a BlackBerry. 0.1% of operating systems running off the BlackBerry, and I'm one of them. So maybe I can't be one of the 1%ers who has that crazy net worth that's just driving the whole U.S. economy. But I am a 0.1%er.
You are a
BlackBerry.
We call that elite. You're elite.
Oh man. So yeah, it's interesting. Apple's they just have, it's just like I said, it's a $2 trillion company by market cap, just enormously huge. And a lot of these big tech companies, they don't have the rosiest reputations for playing nice, and they've got huge businesses and they've got shareholders that they've got to answer to, and they play hardball. They definitely play hardball.
True.
Let's
That
take a
they
look
do.
at the next slide here. So let's talk a little bit about this whole issue of antitrust. And we have these antitrust laws in the United States. They go back over 100 years, and it's all geared around promoting fairness in the marketplace, and specifically with regard to checking any company or business that seems to represent an unfair competitive advantage or a monopoly, so to speak. And throughout the years, we've had a number of really high profile antitrust suits in the United States. And one of the first big ones was Standard Oil, which at one time in the early 20th century pretty much ran the entire oil industry in the United States. And they were sued by the federal government, and ultimately the federal government won, and they broke Standard Oil up into 34 or 35 smaller oil companies. And one of those companies became ExxonMobil. So the idea is if one company just completely owns a product or service, completely dominates an industry, smaller companies aren't able to come in. They're not able to prosper. They're not, the customers, the consumer isn't provided other options for purchasing things. And ultimately, if a company owns too much of an industry, they dominate too much of an industry, they can pretty much control pricing. They can control how the products are distributed. They pretty much just, it's like think of like almost like a monarchy, so to speak. I mean, they just completely can dominate and provide a lot of unfair challenges for consumers and other businesses as well. So the idea is monopolies are not a good thing in the United States. We don't want that. We want competitive businesses and industries in which other players are around. So, I want Coke is great, but I want to be able to buy a Pepsi too.
Sure.
McDonald's well, good, but I want Burger King. I want Wendy's. I don't want just McDonald's.
Consumers love competition, but businesses naturally move toward monopoly. Big businesses love monopoly. And so, I think we've seen even here, our big legacy airlines are not real happy with like Etihad and Qatar Airlines and things like that are run by the Middle Eastern countries. And these are airlines that are subsidized by governments. They're monopolistic in their own country. And now they're coming over here and they're using that monopoly power in one country to give them leverage here with gate spaces and things like that. So yeah, we as consumers love competition because it gives us choice, but the big companies kind of gravitate toward consolidation. And as you point out here, it's not just oil.
No, I mean, the railroad industry has a long history of antitrust issues. AT&T many years ago, they were sued, and ultimately they broke that up. And that's now why we have, Quest and Spectrum and Verizon and all these different options for having a phone, because years ago there was pretty much just one option in the United States, and that was AT&T. And that was in my lifetime. And what makes this Apple and Epic lawsuit so interesting is what we're dealing with here in this case is this closed platform, right? And
right.
In fact, Epic argued what Apple has is this closed garden, right? To be an Apple, it's a closed garden. Nobody else is allowed in. It's completely locked off. This closed platform, so to speak. And we've had closed platforms before, because Kodak, they were accused at one time of having a closed platform with regard to the technology with their cameras, and also Microsoft with regard to Windows operating system. But we've never had a closed platform issue of the magnitude we have now with regard to this new digital economy. So that's why this is so epic, pun intended, because we've just never seen this before. And again, this digital economy is just growing by leaps and bounds. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And how this all plays out is just going to be really, really interesting in terms of how we define markets, how we define monopolies, how we define these closed platforms, what it all means for tech companies, what it all means for us as consumers. You just can't overstate the magnitude of what's going on here.
Yep.
So let's take a look. Another key aspect of this whole issue is the idea of essential facilities, right? And this goes back, in fact, that judge, the circuit judge that's presiding over this case, Judge Gonzalez Rogers, her concern was, well, where are the essential facilities? Because usually when you have a monopoly, there's some kind of an essential facility. Like with Standard Oil, it was controlling all those gas stations and having all the supply lines to oil.
Right.
And she argued, or she didn't argue, but she pressed this whole issue with railroads, because at one time there was an antitrust lawsuit with some railroads around St. Louis, Missouri. And the whole issue was that these railroads were controlling these bridges infrastructure that was allowing rail cars to pass in and out of St. Louis, and also controlling the rail yards. And that's where this whole case gets a little gray, because what is the essential facility with regard to Apple and its app store? Because like you can say, well, is it the app store? Is it the technology driving the app store? So it's tricky. And that's why, again, why so much of this is groundbreaking, because I think a lot of these issues, a lot of these concepts as a society and even as companies and regulators have not really determined like what this all really means. And because it's all digital, right? The days of infrastructure is a bridge, or it's a pipeline or a gas station, or no, now it's all digital. It's all in your phone. And it's just a lot harder to define. The barriers, the boundaries are much less clear. So this is one of the big challenges that Epic Games has come across with this whole case, is defining how Apple controls or dominates with this essential facility. What is it, and how does it operate? And I think Epic they're in a tight squeeze here. It's going to be interesting to see how this case goes. Again, you have other options besides the App Store. And, like you think about a shopping mall, you go into a shopping mall, you can, you pretty much have to pay according to, if you have a store in a shopping mall, you have to adhere to a certain set of policies. And it's all going to come down to how the court interprets a market and how broadly they interpret that market. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And so I think you've got a slide on that too.
Yeah. So what is this digital market, right? So Epic argued in court over the last month that the market is this ability to distribute apps on iPhones, right? It's this whole system that allows this platform for distributing apps. And Apple counter-argued that the market is actually the devices on which the video games are played. So that can be iPhones, but it can be all these other devices as well that we've mentioned earlier. So that's how they argue a market exists. And what's really interesting and kind of a twist here with this whole thing is the judge kind of threw a whole new issue into it. And she suggested that the market might actually be the video games themselves. Ooh. And interestingly enough, attorneys for neither side had broached that or suggested that could also be a potential market or definition of a market or what that all means. So it's just kind of, this judge is sharp. She's got a lot of experience in this area, and I'm going to be really interested to see how she rules on this, because there's just going to be, again, it's interesting. And if you go back, it's been harder and harder to prove antitrust in recent years. And the definition, the courts have been consistently just been more and more narrow with regard to what they consider antitrust. And, the basic measure that they use for antitrust is this a business practice that hurts consumers? Does it hurt consumers? Does it make things more expensive to consumers? Does it limit their purchasing options? Does it give them less freedom to use products and services? And big tech has been pretty effective at battling antitrust. And because of the fact that, you look at so many of these big tech companies, a lot of these services are free, right? It doesn't cost anything to open a Facebook account. It doesn't cost anything to do a Google search. It doesn't cost anything to use a lot of these apps. Now, we all know, they make their money through ads, and, Facebook's been running loosey-goosey with how they handle our privacy and our data and things like that. And Google tracks us and they sell that information to advertise, so it's not, we know the system isn't perfect, but at the end of the day, like we get a lot out of these services. I mean,
Sure.
these phones, this whole technology has completely democratized the way you, me, and everybody else lives. And I think most of us would agree, while these things are not perfect, overall, I'm happy. I'm happy with this,
Yeah.
how this technology works. So it's tough. It's really, really been tough to prove antitrust, specifically with these tech companies and how their business models are set up.
So when do we expect a verdict on this?
Probably it's going to be months. I would think probably at least 2 months before we hear which way she rules on that.
In that case, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to tell you exactly who's going to win this case.
Okay,
Ready? The lawyers.
Yeah.
They always win.
Yeah.
And they love a good appeal. My brother's a lawyer. I know the lawyers always win. But it's really going to be interesting to see. I think Epic has a good argument, but I think the case is going to hinge on what you just talked about. Is it harming the consumers? And when you could buy a really good app for $3.99, the free version is free and it does 80% of what you want it to do, but that crucial 20% of the functionality that you don't have costs you $3.99 a year or $8.99 a year. I mean, I know there are a lot of specialized apps that are hundreds of dollars for the subscription, but for the most everyday consumers, I'll pay a few dollars for a really good travel app or a really good game. That I see part of it as extortion. Pay us $2.99 so that we don't throw ads in your face every 30 seconds. Okay, that's worth it to me. I'll pay you. And I don't care how you split that with Apple. It really doesn't matter to me. Because if the alternative is having to put up with the ads, the in-game ads and things, I'll pay a few bucks. Get me out of that ad jail, so to speak, and just let me play. I'm 53, so I don't play Fortnite, but I do enjoy a good game every now and then. I like stuff that keeps my brain fresh and sharp. But I have nephews who kind of keep me informed on all the other stuff and all the Xbox and PlayStation stuff and what they, and in fact, for younger people, and you know this, you have a daughter, the phone is the least used app on the phone, right?
Nobody talks on the phone anymore.
No. Yeah. And it's interesting how young people are using it as a communication device, because we were having a conversation about this today. A banker and I were having this conversation about how more people want to communicate in different ways. They're used to communicating through games. They're used to texting, and we're very limited because we deal with sensitive information. We deal with information that can't be disclosed to just anybody. And I have people who say, well, just text me that. I'm sorry, I can't. So let's go into a game and let's shoot at each other in a game, and I'll give you these documents. And we live in a wild world now. It's very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this case. And I again, I'm no legal scholar, but it's interesting to see some of the cases that are arising around tech, because I think I've seen lawsuits on people stealing digital assets, like you were talking about, that you can buy armor or you can buy different colored clothing or something like that for your character. You can buy these things that go in the games, and somebody hacks in and steals your stuff. Well, people have been sued for stealing other people's stuff. There was actually a case. I think the case was in Great Britain, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, well, sue me. But I think the case was, can you leave these digital assets to your heirs when you die? Can someone else take over? And I know that Apple has another lawsuit either occurring or is on the horizon about who owns those digital assets. When you buy a digital book, when you buy digital music, do you own the music? When you have a tape, when you have a CD, when you have a record, you own it. You have this physical thing in your hand. So, Apple's big. They're just going to be a big target for almost anything. But I think the questions out there for the consumers are really interesting. On the app side and on the digital ownership side as well.
And as consumers, we need to be informed. We need to pay attention to this stuff, because another issue, like with Fortnite and a lot of these video games is, kids get, there's issues with addiction and, the games can have violent content. Now like Fortnite is cartoonish, so it's not, quite as graphic as some other video games, but, you've had, and we've talked about this on this live stream before, how, you have kids that are using their parents' debit cards and racking up huge. I mean, Epic Games has been sued by parents arguing that, hey, my kid spent $2,000 on Fortnite skins and everything else, and you didn't have any controls set up to prevent that. He's a minor and things like that. So.
But where were your parental controls on your credit card?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, these console games, they've got passcode, you can passcode protect those. And yeah, as parents, we just, everybody's got a role in making sure these things are supervised. And it's a fascinating time. And, talking too about like the antitrust and with regard to, does it impact consumers? One of the big things that, people will argue about with big tech with regard to monopolies and things is they'll say, well, it doesn't allow new companies to come into the fold. And because of that, consumers don't have the same options, and there might be new companies that could come along and offer better versions of these products and services at better prices. And well, that sounds great, but that's really hard to prove. That's a bunch of what ifs. What if, right. What if? And, all's fair in love in courtrooms. And you gotta be loaded and locked down and ready. You gotta have your game shored up really tight to get into court and press a case like this. And you gotta have all your ducks in a row.
Well, they got that far. It's not every lawsuit that goes forward. Not every lawsuit makes it to court. And so they must have had some merit to the case to get in front of a judge. That's a pretty big investment of government time to tie up an antitrust court like that. And so I'm sure there were arguments on both sides to be made. It's going to be really interesting to see how this turns out. And the beautiful thing about this, about all topics that involve money, is there's a never-ending supply. So we're going to have plenty to talk about in future shows, Sean, and I'm looking forward to it. And folks, stay tuned. Let's see what happens with this. Like Sean said, it's going to affect how we buy and use apps going forward. And we may think things like this don't have any effect on our lives at all, but it does. And it's going to be just really interesting. Sean, I appreciate you putting in the work and guiding us through this and guiding me through this so that you make it digestible and understandable. And I think I'm going to go download Fortnite now and play a bit and see what it's all about. But as always, it's great to have you on here. Love talking with you. And folks, if you have any interest in personal finance, if you want to improve your financial condition, you can check out our Facebook page. Look at the Dr. Percap articles. The Ask Dr. Percap articles are also on the Cherokee One Feather website. And so he's always got great content, always timely, relevant, useful to your life. I highly recommend it. It's great stuff. Sean, we're going to go ahead and take our leave for this episode, but I look forward to talking with you again.
You bet. Stay safe, everybody. I'm glad we finally turned the corner, I think, on this virus, and we're able to get out a little bit more. So everybody take care, and hopefully we'll all be able to meet up again face to face before too long.
You bet. Folks, thanks for joining in on this episode of Sequoia Fund Live. We look forward to seeing you next week. We are going to be talking with Sean Lawless. He is the construction and facilities manager at Cherokee Boys Club. And we're going to be talking about how you can afford various home services on the Qualla boundary, things that you may not know exist. It's going to be a very enlightening episode. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.